This is just preposterous. Of all my books, Warhorse is the lowest selling book out of all my written works? I could feel the old man staring down my neck with disappointment from beyond this. I mean, I should be thankful it sold 2,000 copies at most per year. I guess this private peaceful draft will be a play, or a movie worthy of bringing the horrors of the First World War faithfully adapted. Hello, this is Michael Marpago.
See, I said it correctly, Mother.
Well, that man has too many syllables in that surname of his surname. Now go on and talk to him about the book.
Mr. Marpago, I'm Tom Morris. I'm a producer here in the National Theatre. I'm planning on creating a play that has an animal as the heart of the play. I was having Sunday tea with me, Mother, when she told me about your book.
I picked up the book in the bookstore after hearing a radio book club no Americans know existed in Britain, and the book was incredible. So I strongly encourage Tommy here to read it and see what he thought of it.
Well, thank you, ma'am, and Mr. Morris. What did you think of it?
Surprisingly, it was quite lovely. It was a combination of Black Beauty and All Quiet at the Western Front. I believe that this is the source we need, and just in time for the centennial of the First World War, that everyone needs to remember here in Britain.
That's because America is the only country to have a national World War I museum. They put effort.
Oh, please, don't embarrass our country. Yes, we do need something to bring awareness into this nearly forgotten Great War, and this book is it.
I have a major question.
Of course.
Is this play going to have all the actors dressed ridiculously like in the Lion King play?
See, even I think that's absurd.
No to the both of you. We're having a puppet company known to make puppet animals so lifelike that a giraffe will make you cry. May take 20 years or so on how to get the ears to turn 360 with a 90-degree pull, but it's promising.
How are you going to make the horse talk in narrative with the mouth? It will ruin the meaning of the story with that distraction.
Well...
Oh, for heaven's sakes. Let the humans do the talking. Keep the horses all natural. If anything, the mouth moving takes away the effect. But the noise from the puppeteers will make it alive, and have songs from that time to help the narrative as well.
Well, that's not a bad thought.
You can come help with the script and see the puppets. I can see the Queen herself coming to the show and loving it so much.
Who knows? Perhaps Steven Spielberg will come with a combination of his own narrative, with a combination of two hot British men before Marvel signed them up in another film together, tolerate a newcomer actor that Newt from Fantastic Beasts was supposed to play, and see an adaptation that made people love and awe captured this work of art before another set of fictional horse lovers come to be.
Thank you, Mother.
What can I say? Mother knows best.
Right, well, thank you, and goodbye. Surely, no one would take the fact that my book brought peace to all sources of media. Did it?
Warhorse was written in 1982 by British author Michael Marpago. Well, it wasn't the first horse narrative ever written from a horse's point of view, but it was still pretty interesting and unique for the time period that the story takes place. Kind of a biographical point of view of the horrors of what happened at the time, no different than any others that saying that war never changes, you know, kind of like Fallout Equestria. It follows the story of Joey, a young horse who gets sold into a family only 4 years later behind his boy Albert's back by Albert's father, gets sold off into the British Army. There eventually, after being promised by Albert that they would be reunited, he gets joined up with Topthorn, a fellow horse who had been sold. They survived the first horrors of the war, at least the first year part, and throughout the series of characters through the German side and through the French side, we get to see the changes of the midst of what war has done for everyone all around through Joy's perspective. There were many powerful scenes, and yet the ending makes everyone teared up. It pretty much shares the same sentiment of how the time period affected those all around, and of the animals as well. Kind of the same sentiment like Black Beauty. But it wasn't just a war story, it was also a story of loyalty, compassion, and humanity. We see people of all sides, German and British and the French countrymen through the grandfather and Emily, or occasionally, which we will talk about later, mother in some adaptations, that's another thing. We get to see that they didn't want this war to continue, but yet they have certain loyalties that they must follow, yet their convictions have changed throughout the course of this time period. Which we also get to see the survival of the spirit throughout the midst of darkness. The story was so timeless that it had received awards after awards until finally in 2007, it was pretty much adapted into a smash hit national theater play. Part of the main success, well, most of the success was the beautiful puppetry created by the Handspring Puppetry, a company that was originated from Africa that it took over 20 years to create these things. It toured all over the world, including America, Japan, Germany, and all of Europe. And it received dozens and dozens of awards, including the Oliver and the Tony Awards. And by 2010, Steven Spielberg, one of the legendary and iconic filmmakers, decided to make a film adaptation of the book and the play partly. There is a source of a dramatic irony that Warhorse would pretty much be almost forgotten nowadays, especially in the forms of the Americans, especially when we live now in the world where adaptations have botched up all the classics and everything, either for a cash grab or trying to lure in the audience without preserving the integrity of the original source material. This is where Warhorse actually starts off really strong, with a simple foundation. Sure, there have been narratives in the past from the horse's point of view, and yes, there are some where, oh golly, I will get to you later. But the creators, including Michael Morpurgo himself, actually suggested that the horse wouldn't talk, especially in the forms of narrative. Just have the natural horse language with the puppeteers actually making the sounds in the unison. But by doing research and figuring out testimonies from the veterans and the families of the veterans of the Great War, as well as documentary through diaries and all such, we get to see through the eyes of the men and women of Devon, which they end up becoming the narratives. True, Joey and Topthorn and Albert and all those who they come in contact with, they're all one protagonist. Sure, you do have antagonists, not villains, because once again, taken from the narrative of the book where Joey never had a point of view saying, "Oh, I am from the British," or "Nay, I am from the fatherland himself." He was just of a horse that either had the fight or flight within him, and oh boy, was his flight scenes in both adaptations beautiful. And even the book, he was all about trying to survive, which that was pretty much everyone's ideal goal right in the war, especially if you were in the Western Front. And no matter what adaptation you like, it's not just told to us, it is shown through us through the flow of narrative, from the description of every word in a printed book to the beautifully choreographed puppetry right in the play. Even Steven Spielberg with Sir John Williams' beautiful score, you get to feel the fear, the pain, the heartache, the longing for safety which seemed impossible through no man's land. Speaking of Spielberg, let's get to that, shall we? Behind the myth and the legend, yes, he always wanted to bring his own version of Warhorse, being both faithful to the book and the play, since he did both, watched and read it. He wanted to bring other elements which he thought he could mash in together, which would be better than the Phantom of the Opera movie, and, well, it was better than that, but in retrospect, it was those that was really good and pleasing to the eye, especially for those in the horse community. I mean, heck, it was even nominated an Oscar for Best Picture. But sadly, like many of those, it's not the horse film that had gotten the golden statue yet. Maybe the Sergeant Reckless movie will probably steal that statue. If I do have several things to complain about from the film adaptation, which I do have a lot of nitpicks, since I will admit I did watch this thing 4 times. Yeah, I'm not ashamed, but yeah, the play, not the movie. The play is better! In Spielberg's attempts to patch up some holes, which would have been plot holes in some theater critics' point of view, which, I mean, let's face it, I will say this now, the play is perfect, which I'll get to that later. While Spielberg tried to bring in some elements from the book in to fill in, like actually having the grandfather instead of the mother from the play, adding these 2 brothers which were not mentioned in the play or in the book for that matter, which I don't know, whatever. Having Albert's father being a veteran instead of his uncle, who his uncle apparently tried to steal the land or such, and yet not the greedy landlord by Professor Lupin. I mean, even not any of those probably were mentioned by the book. Yeah, the rent was late on that, but no greedy veteran landlords or family members or that, and that was weird. And the biggest disappointment to me ever, which was the greatest element in both the play and the book, was the presentation of Friedrich. Friedrich in the second act of the entire book and in the second act of the play, no pun intended, he was the heart and the soul of the German representation of this play and this story in general. You see a man who really has the ability to get more power, and he has even great power at one point, but he's a man who's not for war or violence. Like all, we get to see through Joey and Tom Thorne's perspective of what the others see and feel. Like we normally get to see of the Germans as every stereotype known to man. And even back then, there were still a lot of stereotypes going on about Germany, even before the Reich came into the picture later. But Friedrich is the man who represents the humanity of the German people, especially in the country who over the past century almost had a very distinct reputation. And for him to show that he truly is human, he is the heart of the story for that half of Germany. Here in the movie, they just made him a dimwit assistant. But hey, it could have been worse. They could have made Emily scream and be very overdramatic like in the play. So yeah, I've only met one good Emily in the play, which was close to like the movie. But yeah, can't complain about that one. I could go on nitpicking on the book compared to the play adaptations, like having Joey suddenly be all ready to plow in one day instead of having a 7-day betting source going on like in the play, or having the goose being to the myth side when really the goose was the star of the play. But then again, the goose had his moments in the movie too, but it could have been better. But all that aside, the cinematography, the acting, Tom Hiddleston and Benedict Cumberbatch actually riding those 2 horses together before they would enter the Marvel Universe together. The comedic scenes like the No Man's Land scene where they cut the wires, the barbed wire scene of No Man's Land running through. And I will admit, even the endings in both the play and in the movie were pretty well done. Now, I know I spoke a lot about the play, and I mean, I really did spoke a lot about the play. I actually went over to New York when it first premiered with both my mother, my aunt, and even my grandmother. So this has a very special spot in my heart. The fact that it was pretty much the source of inspiration throughout my college years. To see these puppets come to life face to face was no more than amazing. They actually make the puppeteers disappear because of the movement, the engineering, the designs based on the anatomy of the horse, even to the point where the ears move at a certain degrees, to the point where it took 20 years to research. You forget that these are puppets. And these would even continue to live on. I mean, sure, they haven't had an American tour, which, please come back again. But it was the source that really showed that the animals, especially the mules and the horses, were really the heart of the war. And to think that the First World War was the last war to have equines and mules and donkeys in there, the fact that over 3 million of them in the British side were killed off, it was pretty much incredible to see that it was really the last war, yet it costed so many lives. And there are dozens of stories inspired by some of the testimonies there. In fact, the real warhorse was even sparked up on some of the tales if you would go through the research. But all in all, warhorse in whatever form you want, from book to play to movie, everyone can enjoy this story. So yes, even though it took me a long time to allegedly admit it, I will be proud to say that whatever you get your hands on in any of these adaptations, this is the ultimate horse media that bronies should definitely look at. And I even challenge you, writers and artists and all that, take a look at the design of the puppets. And I think I could see the creativity in the brony community based off of these puppets. So in all, take a look and see for yourselves. I am the Dark Horse of KC. Have a good, creative, and blessed day.